Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a different sort of video for you today. This is actually by request from one of my subscribers to do a video talking about my favorite tools and things that I often use to create the journals that I make. And so I will just give this full disclaimer right at the beginning here. I am not a professional bookbinder. I am self-taught. I have just been passionate about it for years and learned as much as I can from watching other people, watching professionals, and I just have adapted to sort of what I use these journals for. So I tend to use them for junk journals, for my Bible journaling, for art journaling, those kinds of things. And so that really kind of impacts the way that you journal or the way that you bind a journal. So again, there are very traditional ways to do that. And I'm just going to go through the tools that I use and what works for me for the way that I tend to make journals. So there are a lot of different styles of journals that you can make. There are a lot of different ways that you can bind a journal, and the tools and things that you use really depend on what kind of journal you want to make. So there are journals that have exposed stitching. Anytime you see me do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, that's going to have an exposed stitch. You can do a hidden where all of that is on the inside and you don't actually see the stitching. Some people don't like to see it. I actually like it as a decorative feature. That's a personal preference. This book was done with a tab binding. So this has no sewing whatsoever. This is actually some Tim Holtz fabric tape that is holding all of this journal together. This one is a one that features a lot on my channel just because of the style of it. It's a twine binding and you can pull, typically you can pull the pages in and out and work on them. So I really like that for Bible journaling because I can take the page out, work on it and stick it back in. This is actually done with envelopes. So you can't pull the envelopes out, but the twine binding works the same. And then of course there are like the more traditional decorative stitching journals. So there's this one, of course there's Coptic ones, which I could not get my hand on. And I recently did like a chain link one, which was really fun. But those kind of stitching pieces are just, they just function a little bit differently, but it's all personal preference. So when I was just getting started creating journals, a 3-hole pamphlet stitch was the way to go. It was just nice and easy. But then there are just lots of different variations of that as well. So I'm just going to go through my favorite tools that I use regularly. I'm going to give some alternatives if there's something that you don't have, because there are a million things that you can purchase to create, you know, there's binding guides and all kinds of things. And so some of the tools I didn't have when I first started, some of them there are tools out there that I would love to have, but I don't have them right now. And so I'm just making do with what I have. And I think that that's kind of the way to go. So first of all will be the base of your journal. So that can vary depending on what style of journal you want. If you want a hardcover or a soft cover, then there are a lot of options, I guess, for you. So typically on my channel, you will see me use a recycled box of some kind. Wheat thins are a particular favorite of mine, but I like using these because it basically comes with a built-in spine. So all you have to do is really open up the box along one edge here where the seam is, and then this other section here, I wasn't planning on doing this, but since we're here, this other section now becomes your spine. So you have your cover pieces and your spine, and it's already adhered together. You don't have to do that process of joining them. Whereas if you use a traditional like book board or chipboard where you're going to have your 3 pieces, there's an extra step that you're going to have to do to make all of those work together. It's not a hard process and you can certainly do it. It's just an extra step. So, but if that's the case and you want to use a more heavyweight book board or chipboard, there's are certainly options out there. If you like recycling, this is actually a chipboard that's from the back of a mixed media paper pack, and it's very thick. So it's a really good cover. I've actually made a journal out of this particular chipboard. It's just a good strong chipboard. So, you know, look around your house. There's a lot of ways chipboard. If you even wanted to use a cereal box and you wanted it to be just a little bit thicker, you can double it up, just glue it together, do 2 layers, and it'll be just fine. So lots of options for you there. If you want to do a soft cover journal, there's also some ways that you can do that. And one of them is recycling old mailers. So this is an Amazon package. And if you don't mind that crinkle, I'll try not to make it too much, because while I do like listening to it, I know that not everybody likes to hear that on their videos. So I personally like the little crinkly bits, but if you enjoy that, you could certainly cover this in fabric. You could sew around the edge and then have a beautiful soft cover journal that has a fun sound to it. The Amazon packaging, this one that's the plastic like bubble mailer is good, but so are the little the paper ones that they send out as well. Just created a journal out of that actually the other day. And then of course you can use manila envelopes. This is a manila mailer. This one's actually padded too, not quite as significantly as the Amazon one, but even the ones that aren't padded you can use. I have created a journal out of those before. And you can really create a journal out of anything, especially if you're, if you're into junk journaling as, a style, you really can create a journal out of just absolutely everything. I, at one time, was challenged to create a journal out of junk. And so I saved up mail, I saved up junk mail and envelopes and all kinds of things and created a journal from that. I was challenged another time to go to the Dollar Tree and just buy everything that I needed to create a journal from there, and I did that. I actually think both of those videos are on my channel, but it was a while ago that I did those, but just proving the point that you can really make a journal out of anything. The sky is the limit. What you put inside, the papers that you use, whatever, especially if you like art journaling, then you can definitely do, the more variety you have, actually, the better, in my opinion. But a mailer is another option. Another option are, if you get any of these from the Postal Service, these are Tyvec envelopes. And this is really great fabric because it is it's a really fibrous fabric, so it's not going to tear, but it's nice and thin. And so you can do a lot with it, either ways that you can ink this and paint it and do all kinds of things. This Tyvec is also a really good material to use if you are creating that spine piece where you have the 2 pieces of chipboard and the separate spine. Tyvec is an excellent way to secure those pieces together because it's nice and flexible. It glues down easily and well, and it will keep your covers, opening and closing very easily. I recently did a journal where I showed that it actually came from By the Well for God, and it came with a piece of Tyvec. So Tyvec is the stuff that you see, like the house wrap and whatever. They use it in all kinds of things. One of them is mailers from the Postal Service. So if you happen to get one of those, then you can use that. Just even a little strip of it will help you do the binding on your journal. So Tyvec is great. If you like to have fabric on your cover, this is kind of one of those areas where we're going to veer off. So you can cover it obviously in fabric, or you can cover it in paper. And depending on what I'm using, depends on the product that I'm going to use. So one of the things, if I am doing fabric, that I really like to use is called Heat and Bond. I haven't shown this on my channel actually in a while, but I have videos in the past where you take a piece of fabric and you just iron this on. This is interfacing that's Wonder Under. There's a lot of brands. I like the Heat and Bond brand personally. But you just iron it onto the back side of your fabric. And essentially what you're doing when you do that is creating what is called book cloth. So it gives it a barrier on the back side of that fabric. Now, some people will take that and then they will use a liquid adhesive to glue that to their chipboard. A lot of times I will just iron it directly to my chipboard, depending on the thickness and everything. And I have had no trouble doing that with the journals that I have made. I don't have one. I should have brought one over, but I have done that before on my channel, and it works great. But if you want to use it more as a traditional like book cloth, then you can certainly do that. It's kind of a cheater way of making any fabric into book cloth. And the reason you want to do that, especially if you're using a thinner cloth or one that has a lighter weave, if you add too much adhesive, it's going to seep through the fabric and it's going to affect the look of it. It will stain it. It will kind of create problems. So having that barrier there just really helps. So if you want to iron it on, you can. That's what I do. If you want to glue it on, you can certainly do that as well. And speaking of adhesives, if you're going to be using a liquid adhesive, you want a PVA glue. Personally, that's my favorite. And there are several. This is one that is by the brand Line Co. And it is a neutral pH adhesive. It's going to be along the line of, you know, if you're thinking like Elmer's kind of glue or Mod Podge. Personally, not a fan of Mod Podge, although I know that some people are. I will prefer this from Line Co. before I would use Mod Podge. I live in a very humid area, so Mod Podge kind of stays sticky here, so it's not my preference, but I know a lot of people use it. And that's okay. You use what works for you, for where you live, for what you have. Try it. If you have some and you want to try it, see what it does. But I like this, and you apply it with a brush. You just want to make sure that you're applying a good even coat all the way around. I will say that there are a couple of PVA glues or white glues that I would not use for covering a journal. And one of them is art glitter glue. Now I use this daily. I love this glue. I like it because it dries fast, but that's why it would not be a good glue to use to cover unless you're working super, super fast, because by the time you get it on there and spread out, it's going to be dry, and it just dries way too quickly to be able to use for what you would need, especially if you're trying to cover a big surface, a big journal or whatever. The same goes with Barely Arts. You could try it, but I think that would probably dry too fast as well. And so you want something that's going to dry, but still give you some working time. Another option, of course, is to use a glue that is more like a paste, which I would say I would recommend like a Cocoina glue, because this is a paste versus using something that is more like a Yoo-Hoo glue stick. I love Yoo-Hoo. I use that a lot as well, but not for a journal cover. A paste is something that you would want, and the Cocoina is good because it gives you that working time that you need. If you put something down, you're going to be able to lift it up and adjust if you need to, but it's going to dry quickly. The thing that you have to remember with either liquid adhesive or something like a paste is that anytime you're introducing moisture into your cover, your chipboard, it can warp. It can, can fold a little. And so that's why you kind of want to be careful with the glues that you're using. But Cocoina is great. I use Cocoina if you've seen me cover like journaling Bibles, the little pocket Bibles, use it all the time for that, for the fabric, and it does great. So, try it. If you've got it, try it and see if you like the result. Just make sure you're getting a good coat of it wherever you're using it. So, I think that covers adhesive. I will say in terms of paper, if I am covering a journal, perhaps in like some pattern paper or whatever, some scrapbook paper, I will a lot of times use scrapbook.com's double-sided adhesive. This is the ginormous roll. It's obnoxious. It's 4 inches. I've had it forever, and I'm glad that I'm finally getting to the end of it. I thought it would be helpful. It's just a little bit unwieldy. So I do have it in other sizes. It comes in a ton of different widths, but this is a great, really strong, very sticky adhesive. There are other brands of double-sided adhesive, but I just really enjoy using the scrapbook.com version. So I think that covers everything in terms of adhesive. So you've got your cover board, you have covered it in your fabric or your paper, and now you need to deal with your signatures. So one of the things that you are going to want that is very helpful is a bone folder. And I will say not all bone folders are created equal. So I have one that is a more traditional bone folder. This one I've had for years. It's from a company that no longer exists, but you can buy all kinds of bone folders. But What you want is one that is going to be nice and solid. It's really stiff. It's not going to bend, and also it's going to be smooth. And mine like even tapers down to the edge, so you can really kind of like get into the gutter of something. And if you're needing to press out a corner or whatever, and of course if you're smoothing things down once you've added adhesive, you want to come and go back over and smooth everything down. You want these kind of soft edges so that you're not tearing paper and those kinds of things. So this is my all-time favorite bone folder, but like I said, it's from a company that no longer exists, but there are other good bone folders out there. You just don't want one that is flexible. So this is one that I own that is actually from my scoreboard, and you can see it's very bendy. It's nice and thin and tapered, but it's also sharp, and so it tends to tear thinner papers and that kind of stuff, which is really super frustrating. So like I said, they're not all created equal, but a bone folder is just a really good tool to have for so many reasons, especially when you're making your signatures and you want to make sure that your fold is nice and crisp, because that will help with the swell of the spine. So you really want something that is going to be able to do that. You can use technically the back of your scissors, but you know, to at least for the folding part of it, but a bone folder is something that is really going to be helpful. I do have another style. This is one that I have purchased more recently, and it's a good sturdy one. It's longer, which some people may prefer. I just really like the size of this one. Just fits in my hand really well. So look for that. There's also another style that I have. One is also really nice and rigid, and it's just shaped a little bit differently. So there's all kinds of them out there. You just kind of have to find one. I will just say, just make sure it's not a bendy one, because they just don't work very well. So another tool that I use all the time are these little clips, and I got mine in the automotive section of my grocery store. You can get these at the Dollar Tree. I have these ones are pretty like hefty in terms of how much spring they have. They're pretty sturdy, but if you don't have these or don't want to have to go purchase any of them or any little clips, you may have the little sewing clips, you may have some binder clips, you may have paper clips. Anything to kind of just keep the bulk of your pages together while you're working is just going to be helpful. It just makes it easier. You certainly don't have to, but it does help, especially when you're waiting for glue to dry around the corners, just to kind of clamp all of that down and let everything, you know, get fixed in place before you move on. So they are helpful. So a clip of some kind is really helpful, but especially when you're sewing, having the signatures stay in place is something super, super helpful. In terms of poking the holes, I use a heavy duty awl. Now there are many varieties. This one is my favorite. And I cannot remember if I said this already, but I do have an Amazon storefront where I have a bunch of these items listed, because I get asked this question a lot about my journaling supplies. But this is just my heavy duty awl. I really like this one. I like the size of it. It tapers from small up to a wider bore. So if you're dealing with something that's really thick, it's just heavy duty enough that you can make those holes the size that you need, depending on like the eye of the needle and the thread and stuff that you're using. I do have other awls that you can use. I have this other one. This is a pretty traditional one as well. It does taper a little bit, but not quite as drastically, you can see, as this heavy duty one, but these both work great. This is just my go-to because I just feel like, again, it fits in my hand better. So, but I like both of these. They have wooden handles and they're great. I do have a couple other awls that if you have these, they may work for you. They may not work on like super heavy duty chipboard. You just have to kind of test them out. This one is a We Are Memory Keepers one, and it works pretty well for some things. But again, because I have these, I tend to use these more. So I don't know that I've ever even tried to use this for a book, but it's technically an awl. And Tim Holtz has one as well, which a lot of people refer to as the Pokey Tool, but it's just a retractable awl. The fact that this is retractable just kind of makes me feel like it's not going to be as hefty as this one. But again, because I have the others, I've never actually tried to use it for binding, but you certainly could. If you don't have any of those, there are other options. You can use a thumbtack. If you just want to be a little bit careful, you could use a needle. If you have a really strong needle, you can use a nail. Lots of options for you, certainly, that you don't necessarily have to have an awl. It's just one of those tools that if you do have one, it's going to make your life a lot easier. And this one is my preferred one out of all of them. Another thing, and I should have mentioned this, I guess, earlier when I was talking about the covers, but you are going to want a steel-edged ruler. If you're working especially with heavy-duty chipboard, you really want to use an X-Acto knife or a box cutter, some kind of blade, and a steel-edged ruler. And again, I have a self-healing mat down here. So anytime you're working, especially the thicker the chipboard, you're going to want to just make sure that you're doing nice, thin coat, you know, thin strokes. You don't want to really like bear down and try and cut all the way through in one pass. It's better off. You're going to get a better cut if you just do multiple. Now, some of the thinner chipboard, I can actually cut on my trimmer, and I do that quite a lot. Like especially like the Wheat Thins boxes and those kinds of things, it's easy enough. It's thin enough that I can do that. But if you don't want to try that with your trimmer, or you don't have a trimmer, ruler and a steel that's got a steel edge, because a blade like this, especially box cutters and those heavier duty ones, they can cut right into the plastic, or wood if you have a wood ruler. So you really want to go for the steel edge. This was the Tim Holtz. I can't remember if I said that, but that's the Tim Holtz ruler. Another item that I have that I will say is definitely not necessary, but has been so helpful to me, is this book cradle. So I got my book cradle from an Etsy shop called Crafty Cat USA, and I love this book cradle, especially if I am doing a single signature journal. This is great. If you're doing a single signature or soft cover type journal, it's even better because you can do it all at the same time. So basically what it does is it will hold your papers and even your soft cover in there, and you just take your awl and you can poke down in there and go all the way through everything all at once. You don't have to worry about making templates or doing that kind of thing. And it's just a really, really helpful tool. If you don't have one of those, there are options. So again, this was very helpful to me. It was worth the money that I paid for it on that Etsy shop. Worth it to me because I do a lot of those kind of journals, but there are other options. One is to take a big old book and just kind of take it and put it in the middle, and you're going to create that same gutter, and it's going to hold your papers. You might not be able to get as many in there as you can in the other version, but you can certainly do this. Also, if you were to happen to be one of those people who still have a big old phone book, even better, because that works really great. The thicker it is, the better, you know, kind of support you're going to have. Just get you an old book and poke down into that. If you don't even have that, you can use like, you know, a double thickness maybe of like an old mouse pad. I do have a foam. Let me just pull this out, and you've probably seen me use this on my channel as well. Again, this is a billion years old. You can see all my little holes in it. If you don't have something that you can use, like an old book or something like that, you can certainly have your signatures folded in half and just very carefully poke. The reason that you want something like that is because you want all of your holes to line up along the folded edge, and not, you know, and come like straight down through that gutter that you're creating. So being able to poke into something is just very helpful. Like I said, you can see this one has had its fair share of things poked into it, but you can even do that into an old book. Certainly you can do it that way too. So you don't have to think that you have to have a phone, but this is just another item that I just have and find to be very useful. I'm trying to think of the next item that you will need would be the thread or the twine or the whatever you want to use to actually bind your signatures into your cover. So I prefer a waxed linen thread for that. But sometimes if I want it to like match, I want a certain color, I may not have a waxed linen thread in that color. And so there are options for that. But I will tell you, one of the reasons why I like a waxed linen thread is because it just glides through your paper, through your signatures so much easier. So it's very helpful. And also it's got a little bit of tackiness to it. So when you're done, especially like if you're doing a 3-hole pamphlet stitch or whatever, and you're tying it off, it's just got a little bit of tackiness to it, and it just makes it feel like it's going to stick there. I mean, obviously you're tying a knot, so it's not going to go sliding out, but it just helps even being able to kind of tuck the ends underneath, and you know, if that's something that's important to you. I will say, if you do not have wax linen thread, there are options. So I do all kinds of journaling or all kinds of bindings. I've used twine, I have used jute, I have used all just embroidery floss, all kinds of things. And you don't have to have it waxed at all. If you do want the benefit of that though, you can buy a little stick of beeswax and just run your thread through it, or you can do it off the edge of an old candle just to give it a little bit of slip. Just helps the sewing process. So totally unnecessary, but that is one of the reasons why I like waxed thread. And then of course the linen is just nice and strong. So the last thing would be the needles. And so there are a lot of variety of needles, just like in actual sewing. Bookbinder needles tend to be a little less sharp than a traditional sewing needle, but they do come in a variety of sizes and of course a variety of eye widths as well. These are straight needles and you can do pretty much anything that you would want to do with a straight needle, so you don't necessarily have to have a curved needle. But if you like doing some of the decorative binding, I have found that the curved needles are just so much easier on your hands. It's such an easier process if you're, especially like for Coptic binding and some of the more decorative stitching. A curved needle, it helps the process be so much smoother. And so it really kind of depends. Now, if you're doing a 3-hole pamphlet stitch, you do not need you don't need a curved binding or a curved needle. At the same time, if a curved needle is what you have, you can certainly do any kind of binding with a curved needle. It just, you know, if that's what you have, use what you have. But if you are really interested in like the decorative Coptic binding, especially, I would say it is much easier with a curved needle. So I just have these 3 because I lost the container to them. So I just have them in some old fabric here so that they don't like run around and poke me. But I think that is everything. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. Hopefully I did not forget anything. And I hope that this video is helpful. Let me know if you would like to see other videos like this. I'm always open for suggestions for videos. If I did not answer any question, if I forgot something, feel free to leave that down in the comments and I will try to answer that as clearly as I can in the comments. If you liked this video, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up. I will say, mention again, I do have an Amazon storefront that has some of these supplies in there. And so you can see kind of more up close what they are. But certainly not necessary for you to use that at all. But I do have that out there because people have asked me about it. But anyway, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, I would appreciate it if you did that. And click the little notification thing that gives you a heads up whenever I post new videos. And until next time, bye.